Shalom lekulam and welcome back to another Chain Languages video. My name is Yair and today I'm going to discuss a topic very similar to that of the last video, which you all seem to love. In my last video, I talked about languages that don't really exist as one language, but are rather a collection of languages pretending to be one. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about the opposite situation of languages that, for either political or cultural reasons, pretend to be different languages from one another, but are in reality just the same language. In linguistics, these languages are called pluricentric languages, and technically English is considered pluricentric due to having several different standardized forms of the language. However, very few people would call English from the UK, US and Australia different languages, whereas some of the pluricentric languages we'll be looking at today will insist that they are different languages. I want to state that I am in no way attacking any of these languages, and I hope I won't offend anyone with this topic. This is merely linguistic fact. Quickly before we start, however, I want to remind you that you now have the opportunity to become a member of the channel, and I want to thank Jeffrey Schweitzer and Sly, who have both become members. More information about channel membership can be found above. Anyway, let's make a start. Yalla matchilim. The first language that I'm going to talk about today was highly requested in my previous video. This language would of course be serbo-croatian. This is of course a language in the Balkans, and the spread of its extent is shown in the map here. Taking into account across all borders, Serbo-Croatian has around 18 million speakers spread across Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro, as well as of course Balkan immigrant communities in places like Germany, where many young Balkan workers can be found. The synonym for the language is serbo-croatian, shown here in both Latin and Cyrillic, depending on where you're from. However, most speakers of the language will never call it that unless they're nostalgic for Yugoslavia or linguistically informed. Instead, most people would refer to their languages as Srpski, Hrvatski, Bosanski, and Crnogorski. I showed this map earlier of the spread of the Serbo-Croatian language. However, most speakers who live in these countries would insist that the map instead looks like this. What I find particularly funny about this is that both Bosnian and Montenegrin are minority languages in their own country, as, quote, Serbian is more widespread. On this map, we can see the main language by municipality in Montenegro, or Crna Gora, as it's called in Serbo-Croatian. What's even funnier here is I can't tell if this map is specifically written in Serbian itself, or whether they just use the Cyrillic orthography for Montenegrin, which usually prefers to use Latin, but does use both. In fact, script is one of the defining factors between the different standard forms of Serbo-Croatian. There is a Latin form of the script, a Cyrillic alphabet, and there even used to be an Arabic variation of the script, though it is very rarely used now. Here is the phonology that these scripts line up with, and as we can see, it's a fairly typical Slavic consonant inventory. The Cyrillic script uses more letters for the palatalized consonants, and both scripts are actually very clear orthographically at representing the precise phonology in the language. Across the four countries, Croatian uses Latin, Serbian uses Cyrillic, and Bosnia and Montenegro use both Latin and Cyrillic, depending on which community you're from. For example, if you're a Serbian in Bosnia or Montenegro, you're more likely to use Cyrillic. I don't want to go into it for political and historical reasons, but Montenegro is a sort of false identity created fairly recently, and those who try to force that identity of Montenegrin being a separate language, ethnicity and culture often advocate for using the Latin script over the Cyrillic one. Croatians living in Bosnia will also use Latin over Cyrillic. If you know anything about the Balkans, it's that it's a very complicated place demographically. So why do these people all speak the same language with minimal differences, want to be so different to one another? Well, if we return to this map again, it's clearer to explain, but in effect, these identities were created due to religious differences. Although it's a generalization, for the most part, Croats are Catholic, Serbs are Eastern Orthodox, and Bosnians are Muslims. Montenegrins are a mostly Serbian Orthodox people, but also have a Catholic and Muslim minority. People's religious identity strongly became linked with their ethno-linguistic identity during the Ottoman rule of the Balkans, as the Ottoman millet system worked in this way to effectively divide people. If we put a religious map next to this one, it all of a sudden becomes clear. So the, quote, Bosnian speakers in southwest Serbia aren't necessarily speakers of perfect Sarajevo Bosnian, but rather they are just Muslims who speak Serbo-Croatian. Similarly, the Serbian speakers in Bosnia and Montenegro are just Eastern Orthodox Christians who happen to speak Serbo-Croatian, and the Croatian speakers in Bosnia are Catholic Christians who speak Serbo-Croatian. Then there's Montenegrins who are trying to do their own thing, but even after 19 years, most people don't consider their own language to be Montenegrin. Of course, there are dialectal differences between these standard languages, as they're based on the dialects of their capital cities, but they're still basically the same. Regional dialects within these countries can be very different to one another, but we're talking about the standard languages of Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, and Montenegrin. To show an example of how they look next to each other, here is the first line of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There are some minor orthographical differences and some different lexical choices, but as we can see, Serbo-Croatian is definitively one language. Let me know what you think in the comments, but for now, let's move on to the next language. Up next, we have one of the most spoken languages in the world, that being Persian. However, many people don't realize that Persian includes other languages outside of Iran. The map of the Persian language actually looks something like this, stretching far up into Central Asia. So do Afghanistan and Tajikistan actually speak the same language as Iran? Well, we'll see in a minute. Persian has roughly 130 million speakers overall, when including all varieties, making it within the top 15 most spoken languages in the world. The endonym within Iran is Farsi. However, the other varieties do not use this name. They are instead known as Dari in Afghanistan and Tajik in Tajikistan. The consonants of Persian look like this, but the vowels are the biggest differing factors between the varieties. These are the vowels of standard Tehrani Persian, but this is what they look like in Dari and in Tajik. For me, the most defining feature of Tajik is the long R in Persian, which becomes an O in Tajik. You can even see this in its endonym, Tojik. However, Farsi, Dari, and Tajik aren't the only Persian dialects. This map shows all the varieties of Persian. Now, the line between language and dialect is questionable for some of the, quote, dialects on this list, but some other, quote, languages like Tat, Bukharian, and Johuri are often called their own languages due to Soviet-era surveys, but they are now understood to be just varieties of Persian. Bukharian and Johuri in particular interest me, as they're Judeo-languages, and sometimes alternatively labelled Judeo-Tajik and Judeo-Tat, despite the fact that it's not actually that close to Tat. These are both now understood to be varieties of Judeo-Persian like any other. So why are these languages divided if they are all mutually intelligible? Almost all the speakers of these languages are Muslims, so surely it cannot be the same reason as Serbo-Croatian being divided. Well, actually, it's to do with historical empires and their borders. The main empire that caused this is the Russian Empire, which once controlled almost all of Central Asia and conquered the territory of modern Azerbaijan from Qajar, Iran. Persian speakers in Azerbaijan and Dagestan were given the identity Tat, not to be confused with the Tati language, which is another Iranian language which actually is distinct from Persian. Those in Central Asia were called Tajiks. Like many empires, Russia used a divide and conquer tactic by giving different identities to the same people by exploiting historical differences, such as clans, and exaggerating them more than they actually were realistically. This is also why Tat and Tajik use the Cyrillic script instead of the Perso-Arabic one. Similarly, though never part of a European empire, Afghanistan was under heavy influence of the British Empire, and the British exploited those same differences, leading to a separate ethno-linguistic identity. This is not to say that today the speakers of these different Persian varieties are not at all aware that their, quote, languages are linked. I've heard Persian speakers attest how well they can understand Dari Afghans and Tajiks. However, these languages continue to be designated as separate languages due to the fact that Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan are all separate independent states in the modern day. Before we finish this section, however, let's take a look at some examples of Standard Persian, Afghani Dari, and Standard Tajik. Here we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Tehrani Persian with the Persian script below, then again in Dari with its native script, and finally the same text in Tajik with its native Cyrillic below. You might be able to see that Persian and Dari are both pretty similar, and Tajik seems to be the most divergent. However, it seems to be only a few dialectal differences, and I'm sure with enough exposure, a Persian from Tehran would have no issue understanding a Tajik from Dushanbe. So with that, we will move on to our final language. The last language we're going to discuss was also highly requested in my last video. The best name for this language would be Hindustani, the third most spoken language in the world, which spreads across India and Pakistan, with this orange in the map being states where Hindustani is an official language. Overall, Hindustani has 750 million speakers worldwide, at least when you combine Hindi and Urdu together. And that's the thing, you've probably heard of the Hindi language and the Urdu language, but in reality they are just two standardized registers of the same language. Hindi is the official lingua franca of the Republic of India, and Urdu is the official language and lingua franca of Pakistan. However, that does not tell the full story. Similar to the situation in the Balkans, the identity of language is somewhat more tied to religion than the standard forms itself. Take a look at this map, supposedly of the Urdu language in India. If we compare this with a map of the Muslim population in India, the situation quickly becomes clear. Interestingly enough, if we look at this map of languages in Pakistan, we can't actually see Urdu very much. It's not common as a first language in Pakistan itself, with the only place it's spoken natively being the port city of Karachi. In fact, there are more native speakers of, quote, Urdu in India than in Pakistan. Pakistanis learn Urdu as a second language and a lingua franca between themselves, whereas the majority of Pakistanis themselves speak Punjabi, Pashto, or Sindhi natively. What's interesting is the number of people who learn Urdu as a second language in India, although I suspect these are Muslims who speak other languages such as Gujarati and then learn Hindi as a second language and then register their language as Urdu for socio-religious reasons. The old city of Dhaka, Bangladesh, also has a community of speakers who speak a fairly divergent dialect of Urdu called Old Dhaka Urdu, but it's closer to Indian Hindi than it is to standard Pakistani Urdu, and once again it's highly likely to only be called Urdu for socio-religious reasons, as Bangladesh is a majority Muslim country. So let's actually take a look at Hindustani, first with its phonology. Hindustani has a rich consonant and vowel inventory with many variant sounds. For example, Hindustani is well known for its aspirated consonants, and these are not allophones of the same phoneme, but instead completely different realizations that affect the meanings in words. Take these examples forever, Khan and Khan. The short aspirated breath makes a difference in meaning. It's not a full H sound, however. It goes without saying, but please excuse my pronunciation. Similarly, there are these consonants, which are known as retroflex stops and are produced with the tongue touching the roof of the mouth as a simplification. They are also distinguished between aspirated and non-aspirated variants, such as dal and tal. En revanche, this phoneme, which is somewhere between a V and a W, is highly allophonic, which is why you might hear Indians who speak English as a second language mix both of them up in casual speech. Apparently this differs more in dialect and occurs more in India than in Pakistan. The biggest difference that is immediately noticeable between Hindi and Urdu is the script, as Urdu uses a variant of the Perso-Arabic script, whereas Hindi uses the Devanagari script, which was developed originally for writing classical Sanskrit, the predecessor to modern Hindustani. Devanagari is a very clever script as it's an abugida, a script which builds its vowels around the consonants, making it incredibly versatile. Finally, let's take a look at some samples from both Hindi and Urdu. Here is the Hindi variant of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights with the Devanagari original above and the romanization below. Official Hindi uses a lot of Sanskrit-derived words, sort of like how we use Latin and Greek words in English in formal settings. Spoken Hindi features a lot more colloquialisms, especially from English and Dravidian languages. The Urdu equivalents, however, may initially appear to be very different, and you may even notice a similarity with the previous section on Persian. That's because formal Urdu uses a much higher volume of Persian, Arabic, and Turkic loanwords in order to differentiate itself from Sanskrit, which is associated with Hinduism. Again, the everyday spoken varieties of both languages are much closer to each other and can be understood by both sides. Let me know what you think in the comments below, but for now, that's all we have for today. Thank you all for watching. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. Don't forget to check out the possibility of channel membership and see if it sounds right for you. I would highly appreciate it. If not, I still massively appreciate a like and subscribe, and of course I will respond to as many people as I can in the comments. I do apologize. I'm not feeling well. I am under the weather at the moment, and this is the first day where I can speak properly without coughing every 5 minutes, but my voice might not sound 100% in this video, and that is why. But alas, I have to get the video out for today, so here it is. Let me know what you thought of the video, and until next time, Toda raba ve yalla bye.